Happy awkward racist Uncle ruins dinner day. I mean Thanksgiving. Now let me ruin it for you. Pretty much everybody at this point knows that Thanksgiving is really rape and pillage day. And unfortunately, that little play we all did in elementary school where we dressed up like pilgrims and natives and had a big feast together and were a happy family was more or less bullshit. But how did the white meat washed version of Turkey Day get made up in the first place? So you know how the story goes. The Pilgrims land at Plymouth Rock in 1620, disembarking off the Mayflower onto what is modern-day Massachusetts. And the native Wampanoag tribe, I think it was, were like, these dumb motherfuckers are gonna die as soon as the snow flies if we don't help them. So they grew them some corn and turkeys and pumpkins and mashed potatoes, and they had a cornucopia like in the Hunger Games, which is probably the most accurate representation of what actually happened. And then they had a big feast, and the Pilgrims didn't die, and they all lived happily ever after until we, murdered them all and took their land. And there are parts of the story that are actually true. Now, in the couple centuries between Christopher Columbus getting fucking lost on the way to India and buckle hats becoming trendy in New England, there's a bunch of potential origins to the Thanksgiving story that long predate the Pilgrims. Now, since the dirty Europeans had been there a while before the Pilgrims got there and diseased up the place, it's an estimated 90% of the Native American population had been wiped out by their inability to bathe. Not even joking, the civilized Europeans smelled so fucking bad to the Native Americans that they literally tried to teach them how to wash themselves. And they couldn't figure it out, partially because taking off all of their clothes was too immodest. So, they just wore the same dirty shit all the time and was like, bathing was a hassle, I guess. So anyway, by the time the Pilgrims landed, there was, French and English and Spanish settlers on the American mainland. And then there was other native tribes that didn't always get along with the other settlers and the other native tribes. So the Pilgrims and their local native tribes struck an alliance. They're like, hey, we've been completely massacred by those shitty plagues you brought over, so we don't have the numbers to fight off the other white assholes landing here. And we could use an edge against our grumpy neighbors we don't get along with. And you people are literally too fucking stupid to feed yourselves, so we will help you not die from starvation, and you help us not get overrun by all the other assholes. And the Pilgrims were like, yeah, that seems like a pretty good idea. Like, we don't like the French that much anyway, so we'll help you kick their ass, and you just keep us fed. And that's what they did. And so they had a big feast to celebrate, except there was no like pumpkin pie or the shit we normally associate with Thanksgiving. Anyway, this agreement worked for a little bit until the Pilgrims got established, and they kept bringing more and more Pilgrims over. And pretty soon they'd taken over a bunch of the native space and were like passing, laws and regulations to tell the natives what they could and couldn't do in their own society. And then as tensions grew, the Pilgrims ended up executing some of the natives for allegedly killing one of their translators or something. And this sparked a war called King Philip's War. King Philip was actually the chief of the tribe, and the war thing didn't go super well for the natives, and they pretty much massacred the tribe. They beheaded and dismembered King Philip's body and put his head on a pike and left it there outside of the town for like 25 years. So that's the unabridged version, but how did we get to the warm, fuzzy version we all know and hate because it makes us spend time with family members we don't want to see today? And the answer is, of course, to try to bring white people together. None other than Abraham Lincoln made Thanksgiving an official federal holiday in 1863. Because at the time, some white people who were mad that they were possibly going to get told that they weren't allowed to own brown people anymore were trying to start a war with the other white people who were like, you probably shouldn't own brown people anymore. And Abraham Lincoln was like, hey, maybe a warm, fuzzy holiday about shit we should be thankful for would calm some things down. Also, we can include the natives in this warm, fuzzy holiday because I kind of need the military forces that we're using to beat them into submission to come beat, these racist southern fucks into submission instead, and maybe this will help them feel better. Maybe if we give the natives some credit too, they'll forget about that whole, largest mass execution in the history of our country thing that we did the Dakota Sioux in Mankato, Minnesota last year, because that would be helpful, to help bury the hatchet with some turkey. So that's the real history of Thanksgiving. It didn't start in Plymouth in 1620. It really took root over 200 years later as a whitewashed propaganda holiday to help white people get along. Which is sort of the case with most of our holidays, I guess. But at least you can take solace in the fact of knowing that as brutal as it is having dinner with Uncle Bob once a year, it's not nearly as brutal as it could be.